My mother-in-law wanted $100,000 for a dorm shower. By the end, she'd regret every word. I'm going to tell this exactly as it happened, in my voice, with every turn and every pause, and I'll keep the rhythm markers in so it reads the way it sounded in my head. No embellishment needed. We cut off contact with my husband's family in 2016. No calls, no visits, no holidays, nothing. It wasn't impulsive or petty. For more than 20 years before that, we tried every version of let's talk, every boundary, every reset, every maybe this time it'll be different. We'd state a limit, they'd cross it. We'd clean up the fallout, they'd act shocked we were upset, then repeat the exact same thing. At some point, you realize the merry-go-round isn't broken, it's the ride. We stepped off. They didn't. They kept circling our lives like a noisy parade that refuses to leave the street. Since you can't block the United States Postal Service, envelopes still found us. Glossy cards. Heavy paper. Family updates paperclip to lists of items they wanted. Not thank yous. Not how are you. Lists. Imagine wedding registries except they never end. Birthdays, Christmas, graduations, anniversaries. We moved, we sneezed, we survived Tuesday. Someone always deserved something expensive. After a while, the rhythm of it gets darkly funny. A paragraph of performative family warmth, 2 pages of bar-coded wishes, and a stamped return envelope like we were a charity. The only person we still spoke to was my husband's aunt. She lived in another state, had a gentle backbone and a clear sense of right and wrong, and didn't treat conversation like a fishing expedition. Every so often, she'd call and give us a weather report from the old world, who was sniping at whom, whose feelings were hurt, which rumor was refusing to die. I listened with the kind of calm you earn only after you've paid full price for peace. One afternoon she called, and her voice had that careful tone people use when they're about to say something unbelievable but true. "Your mother-in-law phoned me," she said. "She and the girls are collecting money for the granddaughter. They want a family donation." I said, "A donation to what?" She said, "To her dorm living." I said, "Okay, how much?" She said, "Over 100,000. I laughed like she'd told a joke with a bad punchline. She didn't laugh back. "They said everyone should chip in," the aunt continued, "because family should stick together. She lives modestly on assistance and made it clear, no, I won't be donating, and certainly not 6 figures. They tried to pivot and invite her to a party. She hung up. That would have been comically audacious on its own. But the timing was perfect in the worst way, because a few days later texts started popping up on my phone from people I hadn't heard from since high school. "Hey, your folks are asking around for your new number. Your MIL stopped me after church and wanted to know if I still talk to you. It's a degraded. She says it's important." We'd moved 4 hours away and changed every piece of contact info we could think of, and still the grapevine did what grapevines do best. Then it arrived, a printed invitation, thick as if weight equals legitimacy. Gold script, pink flourishes, and a headline that made my brain skid. "You are cordially invited to a dorm shower for name redacted as she embarks on her college journey." Tucked inside were 3 registry links and 2 QR codes. Target. A home store. A bougie brand that sells things designed for houses, not dorms. Because nothing says 12x15 shared room with a resident assistant like a $2,000 industrial espresso machine. I scanned the lists the way you rubberneck a minor car crash. The cheapest item was a $60 set of face cloths. There was an extension cord for $120 because apparently electrons travel better through luxury plastic. Prices marched upward like they were training for a parade. $250 countertop gadget, $600 mirror, $1,200 something that looked like it needed its own breaker, and then the espresso machine sitting there like a dare. Half the items violated basic dorm rules. I know because I read them when our kids moved in. And yes, our kids. 2 of them. One entering sophomore year, one entering junior year. They chose nearby schools to save money and headaches, and we manage our budget like adults do. We never sent glossy pleas, never guilted relatives, never handed anyone a wish list disguised as a family update. Somehow, we survived. The calls started up a day after the envelope arrived. Unknown numbers with a familiar area code. 3 in the morning, 5 at lunch, 4 clustered at dinner like locusts with good timing. I let them all roll to voicemail. Then the voice I know too well landed in my ear like a stone. Son, it's Mom. Your niece is going to college, and we need you to give $100,000 for her housing and food. We sent the dorm shower invitation and her graduation photo. Don't let us down, you owe this to your niece and your sister. She said, oh, with the casual certainty of someone who thinks empathy is a debit card you keep swiping until it declines. No. And again, no. If that word had a door, I closed it and locked it. Here's the quiet part that made the message even more absurd. The niece's parents each hold well-paid public sector jobs, the kind with salaries you can look up if you know where to click. The aunt had already clicked. Combined, they clear north of $500,000 per year. So we were not being asked to help a struggling student. We were being told to sponsor a princess. And there were 2 separate shakedowns, which they kept pretending were one wholesome, blurred thing. First, the cash ask, $100,000 for room and board. Second, the registries, a shopping spree routed through the magic of QR codes. Neither of those is how actual college budgeting works. But reality has never been an honored guest at their parties. I deleted the voicemail, took a breath, and did what sane people do when chaos comes calling. I built a moat. Google Voice number for anyone not already in my contacts. Home phone set to block unknown callers unless they left a message. Text filters tightened. By the end of the week, we counted roughly 50 missed calls, most of them dead air, a few with background chatter, none with a message. It felt like living inside a telemarketing campaign with a family crest. Meanwhile, back in the hometown, my father and my uncle were sitting at the weekly church council meeting when the secretary said, we need to discuss an event request. Our old church has a banquet hall, stage, modest bar, a little fountain that's seen more enthusiastic toddlers than champagne. Members who pay annual dues can rent it at cost, non-members pay the regular rate. It's been that way forever. My mother-in-law and my sister-in-law had submitted an online form to book the hall for their dorm shower. They typed in an ancient membership number like a skeleton key and wrote a paragraph about decades of faithful volunteering. The records did not agree. One bake sale, once, years before my husband and I even met. When the secretary called to clarify, they tried to bargain. When bargaining failed, they announced they'd be bringing their own food and alcohol. The church requires approved vendors. They pivoted again. They'd run a paid bar and charge a small admission for costs. It bay-starred. The secretary explained, calmly, that would require extra permits, security, insurance, and a different contract. My mother-in-law said something unprintable and hung up. In the special requests box, she had typed 2 things that made the room go very quiet when the council read them. We'd like the choir to perform for free. We'd like a parade at the end. A parade. For a dorm shower. I don't know what exactly she imagined children marching with ottomans from the registry while a soprano belts Ave Maria into a karaoke mic, but everyone at the table did that slow headshake that means we have entered a cartoon. With the hall off the table, the next printed invitation used my sister-in-law's home address. 200 people, narrow street, limited parking, summer heat, neighbors who did not sign up for any of it. It was the kind of plan that depends heavily on denial and other people's patience. Word travels fast in a church where people still make casseroles for funerals and keep score at potlucks. Folks started whispering. Are they really charging admission? Is it true they asked the choir to sing for free? Someone told me they want to run a cash bar without permits. Gossip blooms where clarity withers. A mutual friend, the only one who can still wander between our world and theirs without catching shrapnel, texted me a screenshot of a group chat debating whether to attend. She typed, I might go with 3 uninvited +1s and a $5 card that says congrats on your dorm house. It won with his bidar. I responded, please do, and if you can, record the parade. Out of morbid curiosity, she checked the registries again. Most items showed purchased. Not reserved, purchased. Either a herd of generous relatives with poor judgment had stampeded through those lists, or one wealthy person had decided to become Santa with worse boundaries. In that family, it could be both. Around that time, my brother, a man who has survived both restaurant openings and fair weather investors, called me and said, "You're not going to believe who just left a message on our catering line." He runs food trucks and a commissary kitchen with a partner who keeps immaculate books and a very short list of people allowed to haggle. The voicemail was classic, a female voice not identifying herself, asking for some quotes for a family event, estimating maybe 200 guests, suggesting that, as fellow Christians and family people, we could work something out. He recognized the voice immediately. There's a certain pitch to entitlement, like a violin string tuned just a little too tight. "Should I take it?" he asked. I said, "Sure, if you want the story, but payment in full up front, signed delivery confirmation, photos and video of quantity before a single tray leaves the kitchen, and not one fork touches the truck without a cleared invoice." He laughed. "Copy that." He and his partner called her back on speaker while I sat quietly on mute. She wanted the trucks parked on the lawn or the street, right by the house. She expected guests can just buy their own food, like a festival. The partner explained permits, municipal rules, insurance, vendor approvals, the boring meat and potatoes of reality. She called that stupid and asked for a family discount. The partner named a price 25% above their usual rate and added calmly, "Full payment in advance, remaining balance due before the first tray is transferred, signatures upon delivery." You could hear the indignation curdle. She said, "We don't pay before we see what we get." He said, "Then you won't get anything," and ended the call. By the next morning, my brother had quietly warned every vendor he trusted within driving distance. The message was simple: prepay or pass. If they say, "family," double the price and have your expectations. We tightened our moat one more notch. I set the rule on our home phone: if you're not in my contacts and you don't leave a human message, you don't exist. The call log became a comedy. 10:12 a.m., unknown. 10:15, unknown. 10:18, unknown. 11:1. Voicemail from a real person about a dentist appointment. 11:7, unknown again. We ate dinner to the soft percussion of blocked calls thudding against the firewall. Somewhere in there, an envelope arrived with a second invitation. Same gold script, new twist, location update to follow. I pictured a parade route. The following morning, people in our old circle received a group text. "We've moved the dorm shower to the park. Follow the balloons and signs. Is less than #0. 5# is greater than a public forest park." I will say this for them: the parking would be better. Before that move, though before the balloons, before the kegs, before the speeches that pulled the pin on the grenade, there was one more ridiculous but telling episode. They tried to borrow tables and chairs from my parents. My parents, who hadn't heard a kind word from them in 8 years. They left a chipper voicemail about community spirit. My father started a minor maintenance project in the church hall that would, by total coincidence, require the tables and chairs to be unavailable for about 10 days. He also scheduled the HVAC cleaning and the floor polishing for the exact afternoon of the party and the week after. Bureaucracy can be a beautiful instrument when played in key. And still the calls kept coming. Half of them from numbers I didn't recognize, the other half from numbers I recognized and would not reward. I kept deleting, kept breathing, kept reminding myself that silence is not surrender. Sometimes it's the sharpest boundary you can draw. That's the shape of things before the day in the park. A family convinced that the world is a vending machine, shaking it for snacks and cash. A church trying to be polite while saying absolutely not. A set of registries fattening themselves on other people's guilt. And us, on the far side of a moat we built with intention and a tiny bit of grim humor. The next part is where everything they were hiding trips over itself in public. My friend arrived at the park just after 3. The invitation had said starts at 3, ends at sunset, which in that family means somewhere between chaos and noise. The park was huge trees, open fields, picnic shelters. When she followed the balloon trail, she found herself walking straight into someone else's beautifully organized barbecue, tents, tables, decorations, the smell of real food. For a second, she thought, maybe they'd pulled it off. Then she realized wrong party. The real dorm shower was 50 yards away and looked like the discount knockoff version of what she'd just seen. A few mismatched tables, A folding card table with a crooked sign that said gifts, a Bluetooth speaker squeaking out music like a dying cricket. No food in sight except a sad bowl of pretzels and some chips melting in the sundae. No shade, no tents, no toilets, unless you counted the portable ones the other party had rented. And apparently, those were off limits. She told me later it was the most awkward social event she'd ever witnessed. People drifted around pretending to mingle, but everyone was clearly wondering where the food was. A few smart guests bailed early and came back with McDonald's bags or Taco Bell. Drinks? A couple of beer kegs sitting under a tree in half-melted ice. Hydration, they'd say. Sure. Liquid courage. My sister-in-law had dragged a few chairs from her house for the elderly relatives, but everyone else either stood or sat on the grass. The heat was brutal. Kids cried, adults complained, mosquitoes held a feast. The one teenager running the speaker kept flipping between cultural songs and pop hits like a confused DJ on shuffle. Then, about an hour in, my brother-in-law appeared holding a cake. A single medium-sized cake, for a crowd of nearly 150. They sliced it into pieces the size of communion wafers and handed them out on napkins. At least nobody's getting diabetes, my friend whispered. The line didn't even finish before my in-laws grabbed a megaphone. First came the speeches. Mother-in-law and father-in-law talking about how proud they were, how the family stands together, how blessed they were to send the granddaughter to college. The usual self-congratulating noise. Then the niece's parents spoke. They went on about how she deserves the world, how we all made this possible, and then they dropped it, the bomb that turned the heat of the day into pure static. They said they'd bought her a house. Not a dorm room. A house. You could feel the air shift. My friend said people started murmuring immediately. Some clapped, some looked confused. The words "bought her a house" floated there like a cartoon thought bubble full of question marks. Suddenly, every QR code, every registry item, every guilt-soaked phone call made perfect, infuriating sense. So that's why they wanted $100,000 for the dorm. Not for a dorm at all. They'd been using the story to bankroll a house and probably a renovation. I could almost hear my husband muttering across the distance, "Called it." While everyone processed this, the niece took the mic. Sweet, nervous, clearly reading from her phone. She thanked everyone for their generosity, said she was grateful for all the love, and then, without even realizing she was lighting a match, said, "And I want to introduce the love of my life." She motioned to another girl, pulled her close, and kissed her. Just like that. Half the crowd erupted in cheers. The other half froze like mannequins. You could practically hear the conservative relatives short-circuiting. Then came shouting. The rich uncle, the one everyone tiptoed around, stood up, grabbed the nearest stack of gifts, and started yelling at my mother-in-law. Something about lies, about money, about how he'd been made a fool of. My friend didn't catch every word, but she caught enough. "Give me my money back. You tricked me. You can keep the damn house, but you won't see another dime." Then he switched languages and started cursing so fast even the heat seemed to stop. His grown kids joined in. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law ran after them, trying to explain, hands waving, voices cracking. Some guests started leaving. Some grabbed their presents back. Some just stood there with that blank look people wear when they know they've wandered into the wrong soap opera. The niece, to her credit, didn't cry. She just went back to her friends and kept chatting with her girlfriend. Probably the healthiest reaction anyone had that day. My friend took one last look around, sweating, hungry, annoyed, and left. On the way out, she called her friends who were still en route and said, "Turn around, trust me." That evening, she called me and gave me the full report. I couldn't decide whether to laugh or scream. I chose laughter, it's quieter. Then I called the aunt. She hadn't heard yet. By the time I finished describing it, she was howling. 2 days later came the next wave. Updates from the extended family grapevine. The rich uncle had collapsed later that night and ended up in the hospital. Possible stroke, dehydration, blood pressure through the roof. His wife called the aunt in New York to ask for prayers. Translation: let's spread the drama. According to the wife who hates my mother-in-law but hides it behind a brittle smile, the rich uncle had given, or loaned, depending on who you ask, around $500,000 to the sister-in-law. Supposedly, it was to buy a townhouse near the college. But the sister-in-law then started needing more for renovations. My mother-in-law kept pressuring him, calling it for the family. He finally said no. That's when the bright idea was born to shake down everyone else under the banner of help the niece. The aunt confirmed it. It is less than #0. 5# is greater than. They'd called her for the same $100,000 donation. She'd said no immediately. The new wife of the rich uncle had told her the extra money was for finishing the basement, turning it into a lounge and extra bathrooms for the other kids to visit every weekend. In other words, the shakedown money wasn't for school, it was for a family hangout house. Somehow, amid all of that, my mother-in-law decided to tell people the dorm shower was actually a surprise party for the rich uncle himself to honor his generosity, which is probably how she convinced so many out-of-town relatives to come. They thought they were showing up for him, not for the niece. And then, surprise. No food, no tent, no gratitude, and the guest of honor gets blindsided by both a public coming out and a financial ambush. If it weren't tragic, it would be art. A farce performed in broad daylight. They used him for money, used his name to draw a crowd, and didn't even thank him. When the niece kissed her girlfriend, it wasn't just a scandal for the old guard, it was the moment every lie they'd told flipped inside out. The universe sometimes has impeccable timing. After the meltdown, the rich uncle's wife called the aunt again to vent. She said they'd driven 5 hours for that humiliation. She said her husband was furious, that no one mentioned his help. She said she was done with those people. And then she admitted while laughing so hard she had to pause that when they stormed off and grabbed some of the gifts, they later realized they'd taken the wrong ones. Useless junk. The perfect metaphor. The aunt in New York couldn't stop laughing. She called me and said, "Honey, this is karma in real time." Then she added, "I think your mother-in-law's finally burned her last bridge." Maybe. But experience says, never underestimate a narcissist's ability to rebuild a bridge out of stolen lumber and denial. In the days that followed, the aunt checked back with the rich uncle's son, the one who works with him. The son said his father was recovering but wouldn't be handling family finances for a while. Translation: I'm in charge now. The aunt, who has mastered the art of polite shade, told him how sorry she was about everything, how humiliating it must have been for his parents, and how awful it was that, after all his generosity, those women still bit the hand that feeds them. She said he practically purred at that. He told her, "From now on, they deal with me, not my father." She said, "Good, you're such a level-headed man." Then she hung up and called me, laughing. Level-headed, my ass. He's a control freak just like the rest of them, but now he's the one holding the purse. And through it all, my mother-in-law kept spinning her own version. According to her, the party was perfect, the performance was a little surprise skit, and everyone had a wonderful time. When she finally phoned the aunt again, because some people never know when to quit, the aunt recorded it. She told me she hit record before saying hello, because she knew it was going to be gold. The conversation started sugar sweet. My mother-in-law, using her fake baby voice, asking about the aunt's kids, the weather, how her summer was going, stuff she never ever asks unless she wants something. Then she slid into small talk about the dorm shower. It was just perfect, she said. The weather was beautiful. Everyone loved it. The girls even put on a little show. A show. That's what she called her granddaughters coming out in front of 200 conservative relatives a show. The aunt, keeping her tone perfectly calm, said, "Oh, really? I heard it was quite an event. Who all came?" Mother-in-law started listing people, including random acquaintances no one cared about, just to sound impressive. Then she said, "Everyone was so generous, but we still haven't received your gift." The aunt said, "That makes sense, because I didn't send one." There was a pause long enough to be its own sermon. Then, in that passive-aggressive tone only she can manage, my mother-in-law said, "Oh, but you were invited." The aunt replied, soft as silk, "Remind me, what did you send my kids when they went to college, or when they graduated, or when they got married, or had their own kids?" Another long silence. Finally, the mother-in-law said, "Can I speak to my brother?" The aunt said, "He's unavailable, but I'll let him know you called. By the way, how's your other brother? I heard he's in the hospital and his son's taking over the business." Click. That was it. The aunt replayed the recording for me while we both laughed until we cried. Somewhere between the fake politeness and the karma, it almost felt cleansing. Like the end of a very long, very bad sitcom that finally got canceled. After the whole disaster in the park, the silence that followed was almost luxurious. The phone stopped ringing. The envelopes stopped arriving. The world went still, like the moment after a thunderstorm when the air smells clean again. A few days later, my husband got one last voicemail. The tone was strange, half pity, half bitterness. "You've changed," she said. "You've turned your back on family." He just looked at me and smiled that quiet smile of someone who's finally free. "No," he said, "we just stopped letting family turn their backs on us." It's weird how fast people like that collapse when you stop reacting. For years, they thrived on the push and pull, on the drama, on the idea that they could still get a rise out of us. But silence is the one boundary narcissists can't climb. They scream into it and hear only themselves. The aunt in New York kept me updated for a while, the way people pass news from one safe house to another during a war. Apparently the rich uncle recovered, though he retired early for health reasons. His son took over the business, and within a month, every single check my mother-in-law used to depend on stopped arriving. So did the emergency loans. Turns out, karma can do math. The sister-in-law, queen of dorm registries, kept a low profile after that. Her daughter and the girlfriend posted a few college photos online, smiling, holding hands, living a normal young life. The comments from the family side were minimal. A few God bless emojis, one accidental like from someone who didn't realize what the post was about, and a silence heavy enough to count as disapproval. The aunt said my mother-in-law started calling smaller relatives to clear the air. Translation: she wanted sympathy. But no one was buying tickets to that show anymore. She burned the stage, the audience left, and all she had left was her own echo. At home, we learned something simple but powerful. Cutting off contact isn't about anger. It's about health. You don't have to hate the people who hurt you. You just have to stop giving them front row seats to your life. Sometimes I still get a flicker of guilt, usually when I see a Family First bumper sticker or hear a sermon about forgiveness. Then I remember the voicemail asking for $100,000 for dorm living. I remember the gold-lettered invitation, the $60 washcloths, the ridiculous registry, the park with no shade and no food. And I remember the aunt's calm voice saying, "You didn't send anything because they never did either." That's when the guilt turns into peace. Peace isn't quiet because nothing's happening. It's quiet because you stopped letting noise dictate your worth. It's the kind of silence that hums with relief. Sometimes I picture that park again. The chaos, the yelling, the cheap beer, the expensive gifts, the absurdity of it all. Somewhere, maybe, the niece is finally enjoying her life without the family circus breathing down her neck. I hope she is. As for us, we went back to our normal lives. Work, kids, college bills, dinner at the same old table, laughter that doesn't echo off walls full of expectations. Sometimes that's all the wealth you need. Maybe someday they'll call again. Maybe not. But if they do, they'll find the same thing they always find now: voicemail, silence, and a family that's finally done paying for someone else's lessons. You can't buy respect, and you sure can't guilt someone into love. The only real inheritance worth passing on is peace. Have you ever had to walk away from family just to keep your sanity? If you like this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more. Take care of yourselves out there, and remember, even the strongest boar needs quiet woods to rest. See you in the next story.